Good morning. This is Wisdom
TV
with Dan.
and Lee.
And why are you so quiet today, Miss Lee?
Probably because I'm frozen.
Why are you frozen?
It's cold in Florida.
Oh, it's 60 degrees.
Only your temperature says that. None of mine thermometers say that.
Okay. So today we have all kinds of things we're going to be talking about, some current events and some proverbs and anything interesting going on around your life today, this week?
Just trying to maintain plants while it freezes outside.
That's right. We've been covering up our plants and trying to keep our tomatoes growing and our cucumbers growing and our
flowers blooming.
And we have 10 days in Florida, Central Florida here, that it freezes at night for a couple hours. So you have to maintain those to keep things going. So that's why man is the gardener. He attends the garden.
And we can always tell when it's going to freeze because the strawberry fields are covered up across from us.
That's right. They cover
So that's
up.
our indicator. Only the other day you made a mistake and uncovered ours, and we had to recover them again.
I didn't look at the strawberry fields. That's right. So Proverbs today is the 6th, right?
That's right.
The date. And we're going to take one specific proverb, which is what verse?
It's verse 23.
Of 23.
6:23.
And it has to do with being illuminated.
And did you want me to read that?
So why don't you read that for us, Miss Lee?
Okay. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life. That's the proverb verse.
So the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light. Well, that's a very interesting thing. It divides up the commandment from the what?
The law.
The law.
And you kind of think they're the same thing.
Well,
but apparently they're not.
In a sense, they are connected, but they're not the same. Like the commandment comes. Another proverb in that chapter talks about the father. Listen to your father's commandments, and listen to your mother's teaching.
Right.
And it shows you the difference, because when you think of raising children and raising up a family, is what we do. We have the father tends to set forth the law, the commandments, but he isn't around as much teaching in a normal life. In today's world, anything goes, but that's part of the problem. There's no structure. So the Father sets forth the commandment, and that's really what God does. God set forth the commandment, but everything isn't specific. It isn't absolute. Like, thou shalt not lie or steal. Those are commandments, but they're not the law. Okay, what happens if someone does steal? The law deals with the consequences and the actions, and that's what the mother tends to teach. And in one sense, the Holy Spirit is seen as the mother, and the Holy Spirit leads us in that.
Kind of the same thing, the comforter. The Holy Spirit is more a motherly thing of being the comforter and the helper. He
illuminates. He continues to teach us. He's our teacher.
So here's the law. Now here's how to follow it. And here's also what happens when you don't follow it.
Yeah. So the teacher actually is far more involved in the everyday affair, but is in one sense, to think about this, the lamp is like a flashlight. You can see the direction to go.
A specific place.
Yeah. But the teachings of the law is more like is like the sun.
The light of day.
Yeah, it's like the light of day. You begin to see the whole picture.
Right.
And that's what is very, very important about education, and particularly about, as it says, the mother. Don't leave your mother's teaching in the book of Proverbs. But that brings us to the problem we have in our culture, because we've kind of left our mother or our forefathers' teachings. Because as we've come on to this guy named George Jacob Holyoake, and his secularism that has come into our culture, that has got people to fragment, where we have morality over here, we have economics over here, we have family over here, and they don't all get together. Even in the political realm,
well, you know what even strikes me is thinking about the idea of people we've been talking about that say all we need is liberty. That's all we need. We just need to have the freedom to do anything, and we'll just choose to do what's right. But that's not what happens usually.
Well, that's exactly where we're going, because George Washington made it very clear that it's impossible to govern without God and the Bible. And it's impossible to govern yourself as well as a society. He was referring to the civil government. But that brings us to, I think, the person of the week was Rick Santorum. And Rick Santorum really surprised everyone by coming out of the Iowa caucuses and winning. At least he only lost by 8 votes, but it's like a win. He was nothing, and now he's the big deal. But one of the reasons he's did is people are beginning to hear some of the things he's saying. And it comes to your concept of liberty, because there is a movement in this fragmentation that liberty is defined by the individual. In other words, I'll just define it to mean whatever I want to do.
I have the right to do. It doesn't affect anybody else because I'm just doing it.
As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, of course. And you define what hurts somebody. Although all evil hurts somebody, and all bad does. But Rick Santorum had a tremendous quote, a series of quotes that I put together here that I thought really is within the framework of George Washington, because George Washington said it is impossible to govern without God and the Bible. And Rick Santorum goes back to this phrase of liberty. And that's the divide. That's the divide between the economic conservatives, it's the divide, and the moral conservatives, and what they call the social conservatives, and what they call the what do they call them? The national security conservatives. We have all of these people divided, but in true liberty, our founding fathers were strong on national security. They were strong on morality. They were strong on economics. So it was a unity, not a fragmentation. And secularism, which comes from this man, George Jacob Holyoake, and puts us in the box, takes us away from these principles that Santorum talks about. And I want to read these quotes because they're really important. If you believe, this is Rick Santorum, if you believe in the right to liberty, then there are certain things that come with liberty. Freedom is not an open checkbook to write whatever check you want, to perform whatever actions you want. We cannot long last as a country with people going around living lives that are not responsible. Now, what is a person who lives a life that's not responsible?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm surrounded by them. Not you personally, but where we live, there's a lot of, only do the work when the boss is visible. Otherwise, just sit around and try to do as little amount of work as you can. If you throw all your beer bottles and your beer cans away and you're just drunk on your own little yard, then it's okay. Even though you're disturbing people's, peace and sleep, and, there's just so many things. There's so many ways to be irresponsible.
Well, he goes on to say, freedom comes with the responsibility to do not what you want, but to do what you ought to do. Isn't that profound?
Wow, that's good. That's very good.
These people, I want to get drunk and live in my house, or I want to just have sex with whoever I want to, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I want to just hook up. I don't want marriage. There's 100 ways. I want to be a homosexual. I want to do this. I want to do that. But Rick Santorum really points out the issue is doing what you should do,
not what you feel like doing.
What you ought to do, not what you feel like doing. But then he goes on and he says, that is the freedom of our founding fathers. if you look at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, happiness is in the vernacular today is a very different meaning than it had in the time of our founding fathers. Happiness today is enjoyment, pleasure, and what makes you feel good. Does that sum up the issue?
Oh yeah, pretty much so. Or to be happy, I think, in the founding fathers was to have a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and food to make you full so you could work that day.
Well, the pursuit of happiness, see, this is what he's talking about in the Declaration of Independence. The pursuit of happiness to our founding fathers was to pursue not pleasure, but pursue fruitfulness. And fruitfulness was a very broad idea. And he goes on to explain this a little bit.
I think I just interject with that. Our garden that we don't have very much space, but we have a pretty fruitful garden. And it was kind of interesting this week when it got so cold and we were expressing how, we were out there, working on it a lot trying to get lights. And neighbors, because they know what we've done in the past and, just all that stuff, brought us things to help us protect our plants.
Yeah, to help us.
It was interesting.
It was a community effort. It was a doing good together. But he goes on to say, at the time of our founders, one of the principal definitions was to do the morally right thing. So think of what our founders envisioned.
Read that again.
Okay.
That's important.
At the time of our founders, one of the principal definitions was to do the morally right thing.
Gosh, does anybody even think of that in this day and age?
Well, this is where Holyoke comes on, because he has redefined us to say we fragment. We have our economic, we go to work, and we separate God and morality from our work. There is just to make money. Centaurum is saying that at the time of our founding fathers, which would be George Washington, that it is impossible to govern without God in the Bible. There was a unity, a philosophy that came, everything worked as a unity. There wasn't this fragmentation that Centaurum is talking about. And he goes on to say, so think of what our founders envisioned, the freedom to do the morally right thing, rights given to us by God to serve Him and His will in our lives. This is the moral foundation that is America.
So it means that even though you might have the freedom to do whatever you want, you still do not do immoral things as set forth by God in the Bible.
Well, historically, the pursuit of happiness, and this is where the great problem is. This is what education, secular education, that is the result of George Jacob Holyoke, and a result of putting us in this secular box. George Jacob Holyoke has taken us to the idea that we separate God and we separate morality from our everyday living. But it's also redefined the Declaration of Independence, because this word pursuit of happiness is now taken on the meaning I should be able to do anything I want to do. It's the pursuit of happiness.
It won't hurt anyone else.
But see, what's happened, because now we have a secular view, is some people begin, because they also have a conscience, they begin to realize that that's very immoral. And so they begin to serve the community or become communist, as opposed to become rugged individualist. And what Rick Centaurum here is talking about is the need to return to what George Washington said, an impossible thing. It is impossible to govern without God in the Bible. It's been great today. We'll talk to you again more about these things in the future.